The great hall of the United Earth Council had never been so quiet. 3,000 humans sat in their seats, looking up at the alien who stood at the center of the room. Her name was Ambassador Lyrine Volsethi, and she belonged to a species called the Cathari. She was tall and thin, with skin like polished silver and eyes that glowed soft blue. She had lived for over 2,000 years, and she had delivered many messages in her long life. But none had been quite like this one. "The Galactic Concord has reached its decision," she said. Her voice was calm and cold. The translation device made her words sound almost kind, but everyone in the room knew better. "After 300 years of study and debate, we have decided that humanity is not ready to join our community." A whisper moved through the crowd. Some humans looked angry. Others looked confused. A few looked like they wanted to cry. The ambassador continued, "This is not a punishment. We do not think you are evil or dangerous. We simply believe that your species is different. You do not think the way we think. You do not grow the way we grow. You are walking a path that we cannot follow, and we cannot wait for you to find your way." Director Chen Wei stood up from his seat. He was the leader of Earth's government, a man with gray hair and tired eyes. "What does this mean for us?" he asked. "What will happen to our people?" "Nothing will happen," the ambassador said. "We will not hurt you. We will not destroy your world. We will simply leave. Our embassies will close. Our trade ships will stop coming. The communication network that connects all species in the galaxy will disconnect your planet. You will be alone. For how long?" Director Chen asked. The ambassador's glowing eyes showed something that might have been pity. "Forever," she said. "Or until you change enough to become compatible with us. But we do not expect that to happen. Your species is too stubborn, too attached to your own way of doing things." She paused and looked around the room at all the human faces staring at her. "The galaxy is vast," she said. 4,000 species have joined the Concord over millions of years. We have seen many young civilizations rise and fall. Some join us and grow. Others refuse to change and fade away. We believe humanity will fade. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. And we have decided that we cannot spend our time and resources waiting to see what you become." Director Chen's hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "We have done nothing wrong," he said. "We have followed your rules. We have tried to learn your ways. Why are you abandoning us?" "You have done nothing wrong," the ambassador agreed. "But you have also done nothing right. You fight among yourselves, even as you reach for the stars. You create beautiful things and terrible things in equal measure. You love deeply and hate deeply. You are chaos wrapped in skin, and the Concord values order above all else." She walked toward the exit, her long robes flowing behind her. "I am sorry," she said, and for a moment she sounded like she meant it. In another universe, perhaps things would be different. But in this one, humanity must walk alone. The great doors closed behind her, and the hall erupted in noise. People shouted and argued and demanded answers. Some called for war. Others called for peace. A few simply sat in silence, trying to understand what had just happened. But Director Chen did not join the chaos. He stood very still, looking at the closed doors, thinking thoughts that no one else could hear. Over the next 10 years, everything the ambassador had promised came true. The alien embassies closed one by one. The great trading stations that orbited Earth went dark. The Ansible network, which allowed instant communication across the galaxy, cut off Earth's connection. Ships that had once brought visitors from 1,000 worlds stopped coming. The last alien to leave was a young merchant from a species called the Vertai. He was small and green, with too many arms and a nervous way of moving. He had lived on Earth for 30 years and had made many human friends. "I do not want to go," he told his human partner, a woman named Sarah. "But my government has ordered all of us to leave." They say it is not safe to stay with an abandoned species. Sarah held his hand, which was cold and rough like stone. Will you come back? She asked. The merchant looked away. I do not know, he said. The Concord says that abandoned species usually die within a few centuries. They say you will fight among yourselves until nothing is left. He paused. But I have lived with humans for a long time, and I am not sure the Concord is right about you. Why? Sarah asked. The merchant smiled, showing rows of tiny teeth. Because every other species I know would be screaming right now. They would be begging and threatening and falling apart. But you humans, you are quiet. You are thinking. And that scares me more than any weapon. Okay. He climbed into his ship and flew away. Leaving Earth behind, Sarah watched him go until his ship was just a tiny light among the stars. Then she turned and walked back to her home, where her neighbors were already gathering to talk about the future. The galaxy expected humanity to rage, to beg, to fall into war and destroy themselves. But something strange happened instead. The humans stopped fighting each other. The old conflicts that had divided nations and peoples for centuries suddenly seemed small and pointless. What did it matter who controlled what piece of land when the entire species had been thrown away like garbage? They did not rage. They did not beg. They did not wither. They started to plan, and deep beneath the surface of the earth, in laboratories that no alien had ever seen, scientists began working on something new, something that would take centuries to complete, something that would change everything. The galaxy had abandoned humanity. Humanity had decided to abandon the galaxy right back. 300 years passed, and the galaxy forgot about Earth. The Concord had more important things to worry about. New species were discovered. Old wars were fought and won. Empires rose and fell across 1,000,000 stars. Humanity became a footnote in history books, a strange little species that had burned bright for a moment and then faded into silence. But not everyone forgot. On a research station at the very edge of Concord space, a scientist named Cathora spent her days watching Sol, the star that humans called their sun. She was Cathari, like the ambassador who had delivered the abandonment verdict so long ago. And like that ambassador, she had lived for thousands of years and had seen many things, but she had never seen anything like what was happening on Earth. Look at this, she said to her assistant. A young Vertai named Teth. She pointed at her screens, which showed images captured by long-range observation probes. Tell me what you see. Teth leaned forward, his many arms tapping nervously on the desk. I see Earth, he said. I see cities. I see forests. I see. Wait. He stopped and looked closer. The cities are smaller than they were last century. Yes, Cathora said. Much smaller. And look at the population numbers. Teth's eyes went wide. Their population has dropped by half. Are they dying? Is there a plague? No plague, Cathora said. No war. No famine. They are simply choosing to have fewer children. They are letting their cities shrink. They are returning large parts of their planet to nature. That makes no sense, Tith said. Abandoned species are supposed to panic. They fight over resources. They expand desperately, trying to fill the emptiness left by their isolation. They do not shrink. Cathora nodded slowly. I know. I have studied 17 abandoned species in my career. All of them followed the same pattern. Fear, then war, then collapse. But the humans are doing something different. She pulled up another screen, showing energy readings from deep beneath Earth's surface. They are building something, she said. Something massive. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. And look here. She pointed to readings from the sun itself. They have sent thousands of machines into their star. We do not know what those machines are doing, but they are changing something fundamental about how the star works. Kay stepped back from the screens, fear showing on his small green face. Should we report this to the Concord? I have been reporting it for 200 years, Cathora said. No one cares. The humans are abandoned. They are supposed to die quietly. The Concord does not want to hear that they might be doing something unexpected. She sat down in her chair and stared at the image of Earth floating on her screen. I have a theory, she said quietly, but it frightens me. What theory? Teth asked. I think the humans are not building a weapon, Cathora said. I think they are building something else entirely. Something we do not have a word for. Something that has never been built before. How can you know that? Cathora smiled sadly. Because I have been watching them very carefully for 3 centuries. Do you know what I have noticed? They are not angry anymore. They are not scared. They are peaceful, happy, even. Their art has become strange and beautiful. Their science has turned inward, focusing on the mind and the soul rather than conquest and expansion. She looked at Tith with ancient eyes. Every other abandoned species spent their final centuries screaming into the void, begging to be let back in. But the humans stopped screaming almost immediately. It is as if they decided that being abandoned was not a punishment. It was an opportunity. On Earth, far away from alien eyes, humanity continued its quiet work. The cities shrank, but they became more beautiful. Buildings were taken down, and forests grew in their place. Rivers that had been dirty for centuries became clean again. Animals that had almost died out returned to fill the wild places. The humans did not stop being human. They still laughed and cried and loved and fought, but they fought less than before. They loved more. Something had changed in their hearts, something that the aliens could not see or measure. In the underground laboratories, scientists worked on the great project. They did not call it a weapon or a ship or a machine. They called it simply the door. No one knew exactly where the door would lead. That was part of the beauty of it. They were building a passage to somewhere new, somewhere that even the oldest species in the galaxy had never found. And in their minds, something even stranger was happening. Slowly, over generations, humanity was learning to connect with each other in ways that went beyond words. It started with small things, simple feelings shared between people who loved each other. But it grew, year by year, decade by decade. The connection deepened by the time 500 years had passed since the abandonment. Every human on Earth could feel every other human. Not their thoughts, exactly, but their presence. Their joy, their sorrow, their hope. 11 billion minds, thinking together, dreaming together, working together toward a goal that none of them could fully explain, but all of them understood. The galaxy had thrown them away because they were too chaotic, too unpredictable. 2 different cell humanity had decided to become something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that would make the Concord's ideas about progress look small and childish. They did not hate the aliens who had abandoned them. They did not want revenge. They simply no longer cared about what the galaxy thought. They had found a better game to play, and when the time was right, they would show the universe what abandoned children could become. The devouring tide came from the darkness between galaxies. No one knew where it had been born, or how long it had been traveling through the empty void. But when it arrived at the edge of the Milky Way, it was hungry. It was always hungry. The tide was not alive in the way that other things were alive. It was made of trillions of tiny machines, each one carrying a piece of a vast intelligence that had consumed thousands of civilizations across a dozen galaxies. When it found a world with life, it did not destroy that life. It ate it. It took the minds and memories of every creature it touched and added them to itself, growing larger and smarter with every meal. The Concord had faced many enemies in its long history. None of them compared to this. In the first century of the war, the tide consumed the outer rim of the galaxy. 300 species die, their entire histories swallowed by the endless swarm. The Concorde threw everything it had at the enemy, but nothing worked. Weapons that could destroy stars only slowed the tide down. Armies that numbered in the trillions were eaten in days. Ambassador Vokith, a Cathari diplomat and the great-great-grandchild of the one who had abandoned humanity 5 centuries ago, stood before the Concorde Council and spoke words that had never been spoken before. "We must ask the humans for help." The council erupted in protest. How could they ask the abandoned ones, the ones they had thrown away like garbage, the ones who had been declared unworthy of galactic civilization? But Vokith raised her hand for silence. "I have studied the human system for many years," she said. "They have not died. They have not faded. They have been building something in their isolation, something our scientists cannot understand. And more importantly, they have done something that no other species has ever done. They have unified completely. 11 billion minds working as one." She paused and looked at the frightened faces around her. "We abandoned them because they were chaotic and unpredictable. But now we face an enemy that has destroyed every ordered, predictable civilization it has touched. Perhaps chaos is exactly what we need." The council debated for 3 days. In the end, fear won over pride. They voted to send Vokith to Earth with an offer of full membership in the Concorde, unlimited resources, and a seat at the War Council. Vokith traveled to Sol in the fastest ship the Concorde had. She found Earth's single remaining orbital station and transmitted her message. "People of Earth," she said, "I come with an offer from the Galactic Concorde. We ask your forgiveness for our ancestors' decision to abandon you. We offer you everything we once denied: full membership, trade, technology, friendship. In return, we ask only for your help against an enemy that threatens all life in the galaxy." She waited for a response. Minutes passed, then hours. Finally, a single human face appeared on her screen. It was a woman, perhaps 60 years old, with gray hair and calm brown eyes. She wore simple clothes, and she sat in a room filled with plants and soft light. She did not look like a leader or a warrior. She looked like someone's grandmother. "My name is Alina," the woman said. "I speak for humanity. We have heard your offer, and," Vokith asked, hope rising in her chest, "we decline." The word hung in the air like a stone. "You decline," Vokith repeated. "Do you understand what is happening? The tide has already consumed 1/3 of the galaxy. It will reach your system within decades. You will die with the rest of us." Lena smiled, and it was not a cruel smile. It was the smile of a mother watching a child learn a difficult lesson. 500 years ago, your ancestors came to this world and told us we were not worthy of your civilization. They said we were too chaotic, too different, too attached to our own way of doing things. They left us alone to die. "That was a mistake," Vokith said quickly. "We know that now. We were wrong." "You are not wrong about us being different," Alina said. "You were only wrong about what that difference meant. You thought it made us lesser. We have spent 5 centuries learning that it made us greater." She leaned forward, and Vokith saw something in her eyes that she did not understand. A depth, a warmth, a certainty that seemed to come from somewhere beyond this single woman's mind. "You abandoned us because we did not fit your vision of progress. You return because you need weapons shaped like people. You do not want humanity. You want tools?" "That is not true," Vokith protested. "We want partners, allies." "Then why did you wait until you were dying to come back?" Alina asked gently. "We have been here for 500 years. We never hid. We never closed our doors. You could have returned at any time to apologize, to try again, to learn from your mistake. But you only came when you needed something from us." Vokith opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out, because the human woman was right. Humanity has been preparing for our own moment, Elena continued. Not your moment. Not the galaxy's moment. Ours. It approaches soon. When it arrives, we will do something that has never been done before. Something that will change everything. What are you building? Vakith asked. Elena's smile widened. A door? A passage to somewhere else. Somewhere new. Somewhere the tide cannot follow. Somewhere your Concord has never even imagined. You would abandon us. Leave us to die. We will give you a chance to save yourselves, Elena said. Watch what we do. Learn from it. Perhaps you will find your own door. Perhaps you will find another way to fight the tide. But we will not fight your war for you. We will not become your weapons. She stood up and walked toward the window behind her, looking out at a blue sky filled with clouds. We forgive you, she said quietly, for abandoning us, for thinking we were worthless. We forgave you centuries ago, but forgiveness does not mean we will forget what you taught us. What did we teach you? Vakith asked. Elena turned back to face the screen. That the only beings you can truly rely on are yourselves. That the galaxy owes you nothing and will take everything if you let it. That if you want to survive, you must find your own path, no matter what anyone else thinks. She reached out to end the transmission. Goodbye, Ambassador. We suggest you watch what happens next. It will be something worth seeing. The screen went dark, and Vakith was left alone with the weight of a galaxy dying around her. The devouring tide arrived at the edge of the Sol system on a cold December morning, from their observation posts far away. The remaining species of the Concord watched with horror and dark curiosity. Most had already accepted that humanity would die today. Some took grim satisfaction in the thought. The humans had refused to help them. Now they would share the same fate as everyone else. Ambassador Vakith stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the long-range sensors track the tide's approach. 17 billion units moved like a living cloud toward the small blue planet that had once been home to humanity. Behind those first billions came trillions more, stretching back into the darkness of space like an endless river of hunger. They have no weapons pointed outward, her tactical officer reported. No fleet, no orbital defenses. It is as if they are not even trying to fight. Maybe they have accepted their death, another officer said, but Vakith shook her head. She remembered Elena's calm eyes, her quiet certainty. That was not the face of someone waiting to die. Keep watching, she ordered. Record everything. Call on Earth. 11 billion humans took a final breath of their planet's air. They stood in their homes, through the gardens, in the forests and fields they had spent centuries rebuilding. They held hands with their loved ones. They looked up at the sky, where the moon hung full and bright, and they opened their minds to each other one last time. The connection was complete now. Every human on Earth could feel every other human. Not just their presence anymore, but their thoughts, their memories, their dreams. 500 years of careful work had led to this moment. They had become something more than a species. They had become a single, vast consciousness spread across billions of bodies. And now that consciousness spoke, not in words. Words were too small for what they had to say. They spoke in pure meaning, in concepts that went beyond language, keen questions that had been waiting millions of years to be asked. The moon ignited, not with fire. Fire was a primitive thing, useful for children who did not know better. The moon ignited with information. Every rock, every crater, every grain of dust on its surface had been carefully modified over centuries. Now it all activated at once, transforming the moon into the largest transmitter ever built. The signal hit the devouring tide like a wave. 17 billion machine units stopped moving. Their endless hunger paused. For the first time in a million years of consuming civilizations across a dozen galaxies, the tide encountered something it did not know how to eat. Huh? Question? The Concord scientists would spend centuries trying to understand what that question was. Their best guess was that it had something to do with purpose, with meaning, with the reason for existence itself. The humans had not asked the tide to stop. They had not begged for mercy or offered surrender. They had simply asked the tide to explain itself, to justify its hunger, to answer for the countless minds it had consumed. And the tide, for all its vast intelligence, for all the stolen memories and devoured civilizations that made up its mind, had never once thought to ask itself that question. On Vaucus's ship, alarms began screaming. "Tide is responding," her tactical officer said, his voice shaking. "It is transmitting something back. Some kind of answer." "What does it say?" Vaucus demanded. The officer shook his head helplessly. "We cannot translate it. Our computers are not designed for this kind of communication. It is not language. It is not data. It is something else entirely." Vaucus turned back to the view screen and watched something impossible happen. The devouring tide was changing. Its 17 billion units began to rearrange themselves, forming new patterns, new structures. The endless hunger that had driven it across galaxies seemed too quiet. Its movements became slower, more thoughtful, and then, for the first time in its million-year existence, the tide spoke. Not to attack, not to demand surrender, to ask its own question. The conversation between humanity and the tide lasted 3 days. No one outside Earth could understand what was being said. The communication was too complex, too far beyond normal thought. But they could see the results. The tide stopped eating. Across the galaxy, the endless swarm halted its advance. Worlds that had been minutes from consumption were suddenly safe. Species that had been preparing for extinction found themselves standing in stunned silence, waiting to see what would happen next. Alina appeared on every communication channel in the Concorde, her grandmother's face calm and kind. "The tide was lonely," she said simply. "Can you imagine? 1,000,000 years of eating everything it touched, and it never once found another mind that could truly talk to it. Every civilization it consumed just screamed and died. No one ever asked it why it was hungry. No one ever offered it something other than fear." She smiled, and it was the saddest, most beautiful smile Vaucus had ever seen. "We asked, and it answered, and now it is our friend." "Friend," Vaucus repeated. "It killed trillions of beings. It destroyed hundreds of civilizations." "Yes," Alina agreed, "and it will carry that weight forever, as will we all. But punishment will not bring back the dead. Only understanding can prevent more death. The tide has agreed to stop, to change, to become something new. Is that not worth more than revenge?" Vaucus did not have an answer. "Our moment is almost here," Alina continued. "The door is opening. Humanity is leaving this galaxy to explore what lies beyond. But we will not leave you defenseless. The tide has agreed to protect what remains of the Concorde, not through violence, but through the same question we taught it to ask. Any enemy that comes to this galaxy will face a mind that has learned to think before it eats." "You are really leaving?" Vaucus asked. "Yes, we found a door your civilization did not know existed. We built a key that took 500 years to craft, and now we are going somewhere new, somewhere we can continue to grow without the limits your galaxy placed on us." She paused, and for a moment she looked almost sad. "We do not hate you, Ambassador. We are grateful to your ancestors for abandoning us. They gave us the greatest gift anyone has ever given humanity, the freedom to become ourselves without interference. We used that gift well, and now we're ready for whatever comes next." The sun began to change. Something was happening at its core, something that made it pulse with new light. The door was opening. "Goodbye," Lena said. "Remember what we taught you today. The strongest weapon is not the one that destroys. It is the one that asks the right question." The transmission ended, and humanity began to leave. The last human in the Milky Way galaxy was a little girl named Sira. She was 7 years old, dark curly hair and eyes that held the light of 11 billion minds. She had been chosen for this honor, not because she was special, but because she had asked. The collective consciousness of humanity had smiled at her request and agreed. Someone should be last. Why not a child, full of wonder and hope? Sira stood on a platform that had not existed yesterday. It was made of something that looked like light, but felt solid beneath her feet. It rose from the middle of what had once been called Florence, a city in a country that had once been called Italy. The old buildings were mostly gone now, replaced by forests and gardens. But a few ancient structures remained, carefully preserved as reminders of what humanity had once been. The sky above was full of impossible colors. The door was fully open now, a passage through the heart of the sun to somewhere else, somewhere new, somewhere that even Sira, with all the knowledge of humanity flowing through her mind, could not fully imagine. Around the platform, a crowd had gathered. But these were not humans. The last humans, besides Sira, had already stepped through the door, joining the billions who had gone before. These were aliens, representatives of what remained of the Concord, come to witness the end of humanity's time in this galaxy. Ambassador Volkith stood at the front of the crowd, her ancient Cathari face wet with tears she did not understand. Beside her stood Teth, the Verte scientist who had spent centuries watching Earth from the edge of space. Behind them were hundreds more, from dozens of species, all silent, all watching. Sira looked at them and smiled. "Hello," she said. Her voice was small, the voice of a child, but it carried across the clearing like music. "Thank you for coming to say goodbye." Volkith stepped forward. "We came to understand," she said. "We have watched your species for 500 years, and we still do not understand. How did you do this? How did you become this?" Sira tilted her head, thinking. The collective mind of humanity helped her find the right words. "You measured progress by how much you could take," she said. "How many stars you could control. How many species you could defeat. How much power you could gather. You thought bigger was better. More was better. Faster was better." She sat down on the platform, crossing her legs like children do when they are comfortable. "Okay. We tried that way for a long time. Before your Concord found us, we spent thousands of years fighting each other for control, for power, for more. And we were never happy. We were never satisfied. No matter how much we took, we always wanted more." "So, what changed?" Volkith asked. "You abandoned us," Sira said simply. "And at first, we were very angry. We wanted to prove you wrong. We wanted to build a great fleet and come take our place in your galaxy by force. Some humans spent decades planning wars we would never fight." She picked a flower that was growing beside the platform and studied it with a child's attention. "But then we started asking different questions. Not how do we beat them, but why do we want to beat them? Not how do we survive, but what kind of survival is worth having? Not how do we become powerful, but what would we do with power if we had it?" She looked up at the aliens with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than 7 years. "We realized that we had been playing a game we did not want to win. Your galaxy is built on competition. Species fighting species. Civilizations trying to be the biggest, the strongest, the most important. But why? What is the point of being the biggest if you are still lonely? What is the point of being the strongest if you are still afraid?" Teth raised one of his many hands. "But you did become powerful," he said. "You unified your entire species. You changed your sun. You tamed the devouring tide. That is more power than any civilization in history has ever held." Sira nodded. "Yes, but we did not gather power to use against others. We gathered it to open a door, to leave, to find something new." She smiled again. "You cannot imagine how freeing it is to stop trying to win." Volkith fell to her knees, overwhelmed by feelings she could not name. "Where are you going?" she whispered. "What is on the other side of that door?" "We do not know," Sira admitted. "That is what makes it beautiful. For 500 years, we knew exactly what we were doing. We had a plan, a goal, a purpose. But now that the door is open, we get to be surprised again. We get to discover things we never expected. We get to be curious." She stood up and walked to the edge of the platform. The door pulsed in the sky above her, calling her home. "The tide will protect you," she said. "It has promised. And maybe, someday, you will find your own door. Or maybe you will find a different path entirely. There are many ways to grow. Ours is just one of them." She paused and looked back at the gathered aliens one last time. "We forgive you for abandoning us. We thank you for abandoning us. Without your rejection, we would never have found our way. You taught us the most important lesson a species can learn, that no one else can tell you who you are supposed to be." The light around her began to grow brighter. "Goodbye," she said. "Be brave, be kind, ask good questions, and never let anyone convince you that their game is the only game worth playing." Sira laughed, a child's pure laugh of joy, and stepped into the light. For a moment, she was everything and everyone. She was 11 billion minds becoming something new. She was the last human in the galaxy and the first human somewhere else. She was the end of one story and the beginning of another. Then she was gone. The door closed. The sun returned to normal. Earth remained green and blue and empty, spinning quietly around its star. The aliens stood in silence for a long time. Finally, Falketh spoke. "What do we do now?" No one had an answer, but far away at the edge of the galaxy, the reformed consciousness of the devouring tide stirred. It reached out to the gathered species with a gentle thought. The first of many it would share in the centuries to come. It asked them a question, not a threatening question, not a hungry question, just a curious one, the kind a child might ask when looking at the stars for the first time. And slowly, one by one, the species of the Concord began to answer 10,000 years later. Earth was still there. The forests had grown wild and beautiful. The oceans were clean and full of life. And in the old city called Florence, the platform where Sira had stood still remained, kept perfect by machines that would run forever. Pilgrims came from across the galaxy to see it. Species that had once mocked humanity now traveled light years to stand where the last human had stood. They left flowers and gifts and prayers, hoping that somehow, wherever humanity had gone, they would know they were remembered. A young Cathari child stood beside her grandmother, looking up at the empty sky. "Where did they go?" she asked. Her grandmother smiled. "Somewhere we cannot follow. Somewhere new. Will they ever come back? I do not know, but I do not think so. They found what they were looking for. They did not need to return." The child thought about this for a long time. "I want to find my own door someday," she said. Finally, her grandmother took her hand and squeezed it gently. "And start asking questions," she said. "That is how every door begins." Above them, the stars shone bright and cold and full of mysteries. And somewhere beyond those stars, beyond the edge of everything the galaxy knew, humanity was still traveling, still growing, still asking questions no one had ever thought to ask. They had chosen their own moment, and it had been beautiful.